The title of the class that I designed for today is Age is Not a Number, It's an Attitude. And I want to give you a little context as to where I'm coming from. And I know by definition, in order to take this class, you have to be over 55. So I know that we're all in the room somewhere between 55, 60, 70, and up, right? This past weekend, I spent at Omega Institute up in Rhinebeck at a wonderful workshop taught by one of my teachers called The Open Road, and it's Pathways to Conscious Aging. And the work that I do as a relationship and life transitions coach, I'm a retired clergy. I came to Newburgh to serve the synagogue here as its co-clergy. I'm a cantor, but in Judaism, cantor is co-clergy with the rabbi. So I've been officiating at weddings and funerals and bar and bat mitzvahs and all kinds of wonderful life cycle events for 25 years. And I've also been a family therapist and a social worker and a psychotherapist, and now I put that all together into something called relationship and life transitions coaching. And the reason I do that is that for me, the coaching model is not about therapy or fixing something. It's about empowering people to be present to their lives and move forward with power, with vigor, and to use whatever life we have to our greatest advantage. I was married to the love of my life for 32 years. He was much older than I. And 8 years ago, he passed away, and I've been a widow ever since. And I've been exploring the world, as I mentioned to you, of dating and issues of love and romance, and who the heck am I, and what do I want, and where am I going next, and all that sort of thing. And welcome. You must be Claudia.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So they want Bernie up there.
Okay, so I'm just kind of introducing the class today and introducing myself so you know who I am and why I chose this topic today for you to jump into. When I was 60, my mother had just had a stroke. She was 78. And I remember from the time I was in my 30s and 40s, we were talking, my grandmother and my mother were talking about how long they wanted to live. And both of them gave the number 80. And I thought, that was kind of strange, because I knew our Aunt Tina had lived to be 104. So at least they had an example of somebody who had lived a very long time. My dear grandmother died a couple years after she turned 80. And on my mother's, shortly after my mother turned 78, she had a stroke. Now, up until that time, my mom was working full-time. So in some ways, she was defying all of the rules and the odds, which would say, you know, at 65, 66, 67, you retire. And by the way, she tried retirement, and it lasted 3 months. And she said, you know, this sucks. I don't like this. So she got a job in an office where the person she replaced was 87. So at that time, my mom was 67. So in terms of the perspective of who she was replacing, my mom was a youngster. Right, my mom was the young kid on the block replacing the woman who was retiring at the age of 87. So I'm telling you this because numbers aren't what we think they are. It's about how we see them. So anyway, my mom had this stroke, and it didn't knock her out of the water totally, but it did in terms of her working. So she couldn't use the computer anymore. She couldn't function. The cognitive skills were impaired in that way, and she couldn't remember people's names the way she used to, and she ran the office, so that was an important skill. So she had to step aside from working full-time. But she continued with doing things like making dolls. She was a doll maker. She made dolls' clothes, and she was very creative in that way. And she sang in the church choir and all that sort of thing. So on her 79th birthday, which I spent with her to celebrate with her, I asked her a very important question. I said, Mom, you're now a year away from 80. And you've always talked about wanting to live until you're 80. How about changing the goal? So she said, 85. I said, Mother, think big. I mean, make it at least 150. 85 is fine, right? So, and in there, my mom is almost 19 years older than I, so in between there was when I had my 60th birthday. So I was watching this, and I decided, when I was 60, which was 11 years ago, I decided that I am going to see 60 as my midpoint. So that I'm standing at this point where I'm looking back at 60 years, and I'm having as my goal looking forward to 60 years, so I should live to be 120. And in Jewish tradition, you often raise the glass on happy occasions to say l'chaim, happy birthday, happy anniversary, you should live to be 120. So I was taking it literally, right? Now, when I took that perspective, I changed some choices about my life. Because at that point, I was 80 pounds heavier than I really needed to be or wanted to be or would be wise to be if I wanted to live to be 120, because I know if I lugged all that extra weight around, I would be putting myself at risk and probably would have a difficult time making the trek to 120. So I started on a weight loss or weight release program, if you will, and I did lose the 80 pounds. And felt great, and I put some back, and I'm still, on the roller coaster, but I didn't put it all back. So when I had my 70th birthday last year, I'm 71 now, I changed my goal. So I announced at my 70th birthday that I have not yet reached my midpoint. Now, whether or not I get to 80, or 90, or 100, or 150, or 73, or 72, is irrelevant. What is relevant is how I see myself right now and what my goal is for moving forward, because if I can see myself living to be 150, I'm going to be making different choices, right? One of my good friends who's my age, she's 71, she is she's working full-time. She's a coach like I am. Her goal is to start law school at the age of 90. Now, we can say silly. We can say, now, please, be realistic. But you see, I don't know what realistic is anymore, because a lot of people are doing a lot of things that people said they couldn't do, right? But they're doing it anyway. There are people who are graduating from college in their 70s. Right? So why not have as a goal starting law school at 90? She should, God bless her, she should live and be well. So one of the questions I ask myself, and one of the questions I ask the people that work with me, come to my office for a group. We have different kinds of groups that meet in my office, and the clients that I meet with. I often will ask this question. What age are you? What age are you? What age are you? And I ask myself that every single day, because my age is not 71. It's not. When I got up this morning, before I went into the bathroom, it's always an interesting experience when I go to the bathroom and I look in the mirror, right? But when I got up this morning, I didn't have any sense of age at all. I just am me, right? And the only thing that sometimes gives me a reminder that I may be older than I feel in terms of chronology is when I get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and turn on the light and look in the mirror and say, oh my God. Time is marching on, and there are wrinkles and lines, and I have gray hair, which I like. I like my gray or my silver streaks. I'm kind of proud of those, actually. And other than that, what is your age? So we're going to be doing some fun things today, including, just exploring what age are you? Because there is your chronological age, There's your physical age, there's your emotional age, there's your spiritual age, which, by the way, is totally ageless, right? And to appreciate those factors for each of us, right? So I'm going to share with you a few little stories to make a point along the way, and I'm going to be giving you some handouts also before you go today. But before I give you the handouts, because I don't want you to be distracted with things flopping in your hands, I'm going to share with you a few quotes that I have here just to kind of get us going. It's not how old you are, it's how you are old, right? I know someone who is the daughter of a friend of mine who's 44. And she was coming to visit my friend, and I was at my friend's house when her daughter came to visit. And we were having a party. And it was a weekend night, and the daughter had no place she had to go the next day. She had traveled from the Midwest. And at 10 o'clock, she said, I'm going to bed now. I'm old. And I looked at my friend, who's 64, and I said, what's your daughter talking about? She said, she's always been that way. She's always thought like an old person. She's always fetched. She's always complained. She always has an ache here, an ache there, from the time she's a little kid.
She was
right?
born old.
She was born old, right? So, the issue of old is a perspective. It's an attitude. It's how we see ourselves. It's what we listen to in terms of what society is saying. I remember years ago the old adage was, after 40 it's all downhill, right? And I decided early on, I am not going to be downhill after 40. So at 40, during the year of my 40th birthday, I graduated from graduate school. I got my master's in social work, and I had a concert recital at Carnegie Recital Hall. The same week, I got my master's. I went through the graduation ceremony. I got my diploma, the certificate, all of that. And that week, I had also planned to make it a double header. To have it was a dream of a lifetime. I mean, I would like to have had it on the big stage at Carnegie Hall, but I rented Carnegie Recital Hall, and I decided to present myself to the world, singing in 7 languages, singing music I absolutely adored, celebrating my 40th birthday, and I decided that was the beginning of going uphill, not downhill. And it was in my mid-40s that I got my dream job, being a cantor and spiritual leader and using all the other skills I had gathered, and for over 20 years was able to serve 2 congregations, one down in New Jersey and one here in Newburgh. And so the things that people said couldn't be done, I was doing it because I decided early on, I am not going to believe what other people are saying about age. 40? That's just the beginning as far as I'm concerned. And by the way, baby boomers are redefining aging and redefining midlife. So as far as I'm concerned, midlife begins at 50 and might end, we might get towards the other part of the spectrum around 80. But that's a perspective. So you can play with numbers any way you want. As long as I'm breathing, in my eyes, I'm just beginning. That's a quote by Chris Jamie. I have no idea who she is, but I like the quote. And here's a little quote from Shel Silverstein. I don't know if you know Shel Silverstein and his work. It's the little boy and the old man. Said the little boy, "Sometimes I drop my spoon." Said the old man, "I do that too." The little boy whispered, "I wet my pants." "I do that too," laughed the little old man. Said the little boy, "I often cry." The old man nodded, "So do I." "But worst of all," said the boy, "it seems grown-ups don't pay any attention to me." and he felt the warmth of her wrinkled old hand. "I know what you mean," said the little old man. So, we have a lot in common as we get older with children in many ways. And if we have time today, we can talk about some of the good stuff that it implies. And some of what I'm writing about now and some of the courses I'm giving and stuff like that. I want to tell you two stories. And this is in your handout. I had written up a story on one of my blogs, and I took it off the blog and slapped it on the page here for you. It's a story of Super Granny. You may remember the 69-year-old grandmother who saw the car in the driveway headed for her grandson, and she ran over and picked up the car and saved her grandson. When you get this, you can read the story. I'm going to give you just the Cliff Notes version. The woman, Barbara, the 69-year-old grandmother, had no idea how much strength she had until a situation presented itself to her for her to experience her own capacity, which she had never really used. Not that way. And not many other ways. And the reporters tried to reach her to get a story, to interview her, and she kept keeping them away. She didn't want to give an interview. And finally, one reporter persisted, and he managed to get an interview with her. And he asked her, "Why have you been ignoring us? Why are you reticent to tell your story?" She said, "Because at that moment, I realized that I didn't know my own capacity and my own strength, and I didn't really want to face all the other things I could have done or should have done, but didn't because I believed I couldn't." So the reporter said, "Well, what is it you wanted to do that you didn't do?" She said, "I wanted to go to university and become an engineer." And the reporter asked, "So why not go to school now? And you're retired and have the time." She answered, "I'm nearly 70 now, and by the time I graduate, I'll be nearly 73. The reporter looked Barbara squarely in the eye and reminded her, "Barbara, you will be 73 anyway. Why not get your degree in the meantime?" That was a defining moment for Barbara. And she did go to school. And she did become an engineer. She realized the truth of the matter for her. She enrolled in an engineering program at the university and 3 years later graduated as an engineer, getting a job with a local firm who needed someone just like Barbara. So, just an interesting story about one person who believed something about the number until someone challenged her. What's with that, Barbara? You're going to be 73 anyway, right? And like my friend who wants to start graduate school at 90, and some people say, but by the time you get out, you're going to be 93 or 94. Well, knowing my friend as I do, she's going to live to be 93, 94 anyway. Mm-hmm. So, why not give herself the experience of going to law school? Even if she gets hit by a Mack truck when she graduated, she's had the experience of, going through that process. When I was at this workshop up in Omega, we were a group of men and women ranging from 54 through 89. And it was 25 of us sharing a weekend in which we were exploring many of the issues of aging, and aging with consciousness and aging with grace. And so in the collection of people, everyone brought a poem, a reading, a story to share. And one woman said, "Well, I have this one story I want to share. I don't have the book, but I want to tell you about the book. And what I have for you here is the name of the book and the name of the author and a little something about the book and the story." It's called The Two Old Women. And it is an Alaskan legend of what they call betrayal, courage, and survival. And on the back cover is a little excerpt from a part of the book that goes like this. The council and I arrived at a decision. The chief paused as if to find the strength to voice his next words. We are going to have to leave the old women behind. The tribe had decided to move on from where they were. But the old women, the two old women, who had become relatively useless, and they were giving them simple jobs to do because, after all, they were just old women. But they weren't useful to the tribe anymore, and the chief believed that he had to make a choice because the old women, they thought, would hold them back. And so they left them behind. And the story goes that the chief was feeling so guilty about this and also, quite frankly, curious about what happened to them 2 years later. He came back to where they left the two old women. And these women had the opportunity and the challenge to either step up to the plate and survive and thrive, or just die, right? Which is what the tribe expected them to do. They planted crops. They went hunting and fishing. They together created an enormous amount of abundance in which there had been nothing. And when the chief came back to look for them and to see what happened, actually the tribe that had left did not create the kind of abundance they thought they would, and they were hungry. And they had to come back to the two old women and ask if they would help them, which they did. It's kind of like the story of Joseph in Egypt, right? And so it's a story of, if you don't believe how other people are looking at you, if you don't believe that, just because the tribesmen thought these were two old, useless women, doesn't mean that's true, right? And they were left on their own to either sink or swim, right? And they proved to themselves that they could do it. Not only do it, but do it well. Just awesome. Really awesome story. So, it's part of the handout that I have for you today. So I want to just play. I want to play a little bit. And I'm going to give you a chance to choose one or two marking pens that appeal to you in terms of the color. And there's two things I'm going to have you use it for, and to take also an index card. Okay, so I want you to write on the card the first number that comes to you that would describe what age you feel. And then with the other color pen, write the age that you are physically. And then with either pen, write the age that you are spiritually. It's a trick question, right? So let's start with the last one, which is the age you are spiritually, which could be a challenge for you or not. I don't want to assume. But what would your number be if you had to choose a number?
I chose 23.
Okay. Interesting. Any other numbers you want to tell me?
I chose eternal.
Okay. You could put the infinity sign, right? So infinity, eternal, right?
I said 35.
35. That's your spiritual number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I put 60.
That's your spiritual number. Yes? Okay.
20.
20.
I put ageless.
Okay, right? So there's no right or wrong answer, right? So in terms of the first number that you wrote, what is the age that you feel? Just the way you feel. For instance, for me, I kind of feel ageless. But if I had to actually assign a number to the way I feel about 18. Despite the fact I had a fall the other day and I have a few bumps and aches. Right? But I remember when I was 10 I fell and had bumps and scrapes, right? So it's not just because I'm 71 I fell. I missed a step. I didn't see it was there. So what age do you feel, Claire?
Well, I don't know, there's days when I feel my age for sure.
Which is whatever, right?
Right.
But what number did you put today?
Actually, I didn't put a number.
You didn't put a number, okay. Okay. Fair enough. All right.
Right.
And what age do you feel?
That's kind of difficult because, like, in my mind, I feel like maybe I'm about 30. But
Uh-huh.
in my body, I feel like I'm about 90.
But remember, I made a distinction between what age do you feel physically, but how do you feel? So I wanted you to I wanted you to separate it out. In other words, just being in your body, just being you. How do you feel? It's not about your age physically, because
Okay, no physical.
right. It's not about your age physically. By the way, some of us. It's interesting in this group this past weekend. As I said, the age range was from 54 up to 89. There were 3 women who were my exact age, and if you were to line us all up, you would notice that we all looked different, and we looked, well, let me just say, some had a lot more wrinkles than others, right? And so you might say, well, this one looks older than this one, or whatever. But the point is that you can physically, one of my best friends works very hard on her fitness. So at the age of 60, she feels 30. Her body feels 30. She's highly disciplined. I wish I were. I'm not, right? But okay. So just feeling.
Just feel, yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm a teenager. Sometimes
Okay.
I'm 20.
Exactly.
It doesn't match with my actual age.
No, it doesn't. But that's the point of this conversation. To begin to identify that whatever the chronological age is, or all of that, it's really in some ways irrelevant to your quality of life. Sometimes because our physical age or our chronological age does have some bearing on the realities of our mobility, or whether or not we can go get a job because there's job discrimination. By the way, I'm really good at doing a lot of things. I can't get a job because I'm over 60, much less over 70, because of prejudice out there, right? So all I'm saying is there are factors that go along with a number, but it's important to recognize that there are times you feel like a teenager and to acknowledge that. And then, to begin to lean into that more than leaning into the looking in the mirror and saying, well, but I'm really not a teenager. What's important is to identify there are times that we all feel very much younger, of a different age than we are chronologically, and to really appreciate that, right? Okay.
Well, I struggled, but I came up with 40 to 45 because I realized that I reached a certain sense of maturity and comfortableness with myself, which I did not feel in my 20s and 30s. But there are times when I feel really young, 20 or whatever. So it's a little hard to come up with an exact number. But I know that I can't run like I used to. There's certain physical things that, shrinking, stuff like that. So that's why I put 40 to 45.
Okay, good.
Mine would be, I couldn't stay with one number. I tried. First I put 48, then I wrote, that's too old. And then I went to 40, and then I said, you know, really, I think it's more like 35, 30. I noticed, I just recently spent some time with my 13-year-old granddaughter, and I noticed that a lot of the time with her, I felt like I was her older sister, because she trusted me and she'd tell me all these things, not as a good, you know, because of the trust and the relationship we have, but I felt like an older sister or a really teenage friend who could help this younger person get through these things.
That's a really important distinction for you to make, right? Because it's about how you feel, how you see yourself will determine how you're able to relate to and engage with the people around you. And it's really not about the date you were born, is it? No. So, did I ask you yet?
I put down 50 because that was a very exciting time for me with lots of freedom, new freedom, and lots of possibilities, and I did a lot, and I was very secure. And it was a time of moving out into all kinds of new directions and being very sure of myself. So that was a good time. And yeah. I mean, even though you think of 50, I mean, just like you think now there's all kinds of possibilities, that was my time back then when that happened. So, and I still feel that way.
Wonderful. I can see that. It's in your energy, right? And Mary.
I put 42. Wasn't quite sure, but I based it on the fact that at 42, I felt like I was on top of the world at that time. My son was young. I had a very active life. I had a great romance in my life. I had had an injury, but that didn't slow me down. I just felt it was happy years for me then. So, but that 42, I was really, really happy. And even though the injury, I'm still carrying it with me today because I will always have it now. It didn't slow me down because I wouldn't let it. I didn't want it to slow me down. Even though there were days that prior to, I was in a lot of pain, but I said the pain can't rule and make who I am. I have to be in charge of me, not the pain. And went forth. But even at 42, I felt like I was in my 20s.
Right.
Yes.
So, but it's what you're pointing to is that there's no black and white here,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And so the number is just a number.
It's just a number.
But the attitude will override the number.
Absolutely.
Now, there are certain factors in terms of the aging process that will begin to become more apparent to us, or we can feel it in our bodies. And one of the participants in the workshop I went to is 87. Her name is Mary also. And Mary has been a dancer all her life. And she gave a dance concert when she was 79. Then she had some physical problems. She had some surgery. She had, I believe it was a hip replacement, so something with her knee. And she has difficulty dancing, which is a great sadness for her, right? But she's learning and working on ways to experience herself as a dancer, even if it means sitting in a chair, moving her body in a particular way, and going to dance concerts where she can be the appreciative audience, unlike a lot of people, because she's been there, right? And it's like when I go to the opera, I used to be an opera singer. I so enjoy going to the opera, certain operas more than others, because I was there, because I sang some of the music, because I'm inside of it. So I can be a very appreciative audience in a way that, you know, maybe a lot of other people aren't. And let's face it, people who are artists, people who are instrumentalists, people who are dancers, they do what they do because they want to express themselves, but they need an audience. So there's a time in our lives when we shift from being the performer sometimes to being the audience. But it's being a particular kind of audience because we, have a certain level of appreciation. So one of the questions that's really important to ask every single day, which is part of what this exercise is raising for us, when we're thinking about the number and what the number means to us, right? You're talking about what the number means. The 42 means something to you. We associate certain times of our lives with that, the age 50 or the 50s for you. So as we're walking through our lives day after day, the question has to come up, or if it doesn't, it needs to come up. Who am I? Mm-hmm. Who am I today? There was a time I was a cantor in a synagogue. I mean, that's one of the ways I define myself. I'm not there now. How do I define myself? There was a time I was a mother. There was a time I was a wife. There was a time, I'm still a grandmother. Once a grandmother, always a grandmother, I guess. But I'm no longer somebody's wife. I'm no longer, although I'm still a mother in that sense, I'm not raising children, right? So my household, my rhythm, my space, the way I use my time and energy is very different now from when it was in different stages of my life. So if I am asked the question, who am I? My answers today are going to be very different from what they were 15 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and beyond. So we're going to play a game called Who Am I? And I'm going to give you a sheet with little bubbles and clouds on them for you to write in with your marker pen answers to I am. In other words, I am. I am beautiful. I am a dancer. I am joyful. I am grateful. In other words, you can fill in the I am with things that you do or things that you feel in terms of how you identify yourself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me just hear some of what you've got.
Joyous.
Hmm?
Joyous.
Joyous.
Happy.
Happy.
Spiritual.
Claire?
I'm a good walker. Yeah, I walked the rail trail over the weekend.
Hmm.
And
What does it take, Claire, to be a good walker?
to practice walking every day.
It takes dedication. It takes perseverance. Yes?
And scheduling.
Well, that's the details, right?
Right.
But you see, I'm not a walker. I want to know from you, what's the secret of becoming a good walker?
Well, 10 years ago, I climbed a mountain. Not a big mountain, but a mountain. And it was on my birthday, which was last month. But that was 10 years ago. And my birthday, of course, was just last week. So I said, well, I have to do something physical. So I walked the rail trail and took about less than a 10-minute break halfway back. But I could have made it without stopping. And that was a good idea.
And how did it feel to take that walk?
It felt pretty good, and I just wonder, I wonder if I could have climbed the mountain.
When you're in the middle of walking and when you've completed the good walk, how do you feel?
I feel like it was an accomplishment.
So I am an accomplished walker. Yes?
Right.
Annette?
Open to new possibilities.
I have one kind of central thing and then things that.
Okay.
Because I said still evolving. I consider myself still.
Beautiful. Still evolving. Beautiful. So, even with Claire's slightly different I am, it's just a matter of how she's expressing it. But Claire, you are an accomplished, good walker, which tells me a lot about you because you're enthusiastic, you're dedicated, you are persevering, you're disciplined, right? Those are other things you could put in those little boxes, right? Because it's about recognizing that what makes you you is that inner stuff, right? And for you to say that you're still evolving is to account for the fact that until we take our last breath, it's still the beginning, right? As Chris, what's her name said, that as long as I have breath, I'm still growing, right? Because if you're not growing, you're what?
Dying.
You're dying. It goes for plants and it goes for people. If we're not growing and stretching, we're not, we're not really vital, right? And so, as long as we have breath, so joyous, happy, spiritual, open to new possibilities. These are all examples of what you are feeling about who you are. And I'm sorry, I don't see anything here that has anything to do with a number. Do you? Right? So, the number could be 42, it could be 60, it could be 50, it could be 18, it could be 16, it could be any of this, and it's totally irrelevant.